Hey y'all, and welcome to Political. My name is Brian, and Vivek Ramaswamy knows how to absolutely manhandle the mainstream media. This is textbook how you're supposed to deal with these ridiculous reporters. But before we dive in, I want to give a quick shout out to our great sponsors over at Colonial Metals Group. They quite literally have the cure to Biden inflation and Harris economics, but more on that later. Now, let's dive in.
On social media, everything is amplified and spread, and then people actually believe it. You have large populations of people who believe things that are absolutely false.
We need to do the work as a body of citizens to create a civic culture where we can actually have open debate based on facts. We can't blame a social media company for it.
That I see, which is, it used to be that you could stand in Times Square right behind us, and you could shout whatever you wanted. But you could only get 30, 40, 50 people around you, right?
Yep.
Twitter's different.
The amplification.
It's the piece that she's talking about. And so when you see these kind of heinous stories, conspiracy theories about a Paul Pelosi situation that seems to lead to violence in other situations as a result of it, the question is, do the companies bear some responsibility for trying to rein that in? And I would argue they do, and to put it on, but to also put it on them to decide what's false is also a complicating factor.
Well, but exactly. So what I would say, if the company is going to take down something as false speech, the company bears the burden of proof to show that it was false. History teaches us, and by the way, not just history over the last 100 years, history over the last 2 to 3 years teaches us that many of our current beliefs will be modified in some way.
Responsibility on the person who's speaking.
Well, I would say put it on the responsibility of the body politic to say that, you know what, we're going to debate these ideas in the open, may the best ideas win, may the best arguments win. And Andrew, I will just say we're conflating a couple different things here. I think the way you treat the misinformation point is different from the way you treat the category of hate speech. I think you can't have hate speech as a category because all opinions are allowed.
For you. You know, there's a lot of people who deny the election results of this last election, some of whom, by the way, look like they may win next week. Do you think that there should be people correcting the record?
I think there should be people correcting the record through free speech and open debate, not through silencing them and not through censorship. I mean, throughout our history, I'm proud to say we live in a country where you can go out and burn the flag and say, you know what, war on America. This is a country where part of burning the flag is what gives that the meaning, is the fact that we live in a country where that is allowed. And if we lose that principle, we lose the very principle we're fighting for in the first place. So you got to draw this distinction between saying, I disagree vehemently, but still allow you the right to speak.
How concerned are you?
Conflating again.
How concerned are you with either democracy or the very idea that there are large parts of the population who believe things that are just factually untrue today?
So I am deeply concerned about threats to democracy, but I think those threats to democracy, Andrew, are plural. And one of those threats to democracy is the centralized determination of truth. By the way, and here's a dimension we haven't talked about, where the government itself is now coordinating with Facebook, et cetera, to direct critics of the government to be silenced.
And he's absolutely right. That is what has been happening for years now. And if you follow Cyber Mike Benz, I highly recommend that you do. He gives a much better in-depth expose of how the CIA works directly in tandem with Silicon Valley, with Hollywood. We've had the military working with Hollywood pretty much since its inception. So I'm okay with that to some degree. There is some bit of a nationalistic pride that does need to be preserved. But we now have a CIA, we have an FBI, we have these governmental organizations that seem like they have one job, and that is to push certain narratives that they really don't want you hearing about. And I know this sounds conspiratorial, but it happens. All right? It is not a stretch in logic to think that the CIA, whose prime directive is keep America safe. So if you accept that prime directive, they're going to do things that might seem shady, might be a little ridiculous, but the whole goal is to keep America safe. And so, the problem isn't the fact that the CIA is doing this. No. And the problem isn't the fact that there's media misinformation. That's not the issue. The issue is we trust these organizations to do the right thing, and they seem to do time and time again during recent history to do the wrong thing. Hey y'all, I'm not exactly looking at retirement anytime soon, but my parents are, and friends of my parents are, and I'm sure either you or someone you know is looking at retirement and wondering, what do I do? How do I help prepare for this in this economy with this terrible president and with a vice president who basically coup d'etat'd him and is now looking to run for president herself? How do you protect against this? Well, simple. You go over to my friends at Colonial Metals Group. They quite literally have something called the Retirement Package Plan. This plan backs your wealth with gold and silver accounts. And furthermore, you will have direct access to these accounts. So you're not at the whims of Wall Street. You're not at the whims of inflation. You are in command of your own destiny. As a bonus, qualified applicants can receive up to $10,000 in free silver, plus a couple of other little goodies that they're going to package up for you, and you're going to be able to protect your wealth and your retirement. So go over to this link in the description below at colonialmetalsgroup.com or call this number 800-203-0422 and see how they can help you prepare for retirement today by backing your account with gold and silver. Don't delay your retirement, folks. Protect the money that you earned with Colonial Metals Group. They're here to help. And that's been happening over and over and over again over the past 10 years. It seems that there's sort of almost this brain rot that is just allowed to just seep out of their minds in both the CIA and in the mainstream media. For instance, this reporter, what he's really asking isn't, do you believe that you should be fact-checked? That's not what he's asking. What he's really asking is, do you still trust the mainstream media? That's what he's wanting to get Vivek to say. And Vivek is smart enough not to play that game. Now, granted, I'm not in that game exactly. I'm quite literally telling you there's no reason to trust any mainstream media outlet anymore because they've lost a lot of their own credibility. And in doing so, they've made for themselves a world where a lot of Americans just carte blanche don't believe what they see in the mainstream media. A lot of Americans aren't just fed up. They fully understand that, hey, they're lying to us. Okay? It's really that simple. You can trust these organizations to lie to you. It's like that old adage of, do you know how a politician is lying? Whenever he moves his mouth. I hate that we've come to this point because we seem to have lost this virtue of truth that just keeps on getting worse and worse, particularly in one segment of the population. Now, granted, it's not just one side anymore. There's a lot on the right, and I don't like acting as a policeman here, but there's times where we get things wrong and we need to be called out. But the reality is, we're not the ones in charge, we're not the ones in power, we're not the ones being catered to morning, noon, and night because we're not rich white liberals who live up in their ivory towers in their gated communities. And what's been happening over and over and over again is that organizations like the New York Times, CNN, all the legacy media, all the mainstream media outlets, they're out there trying to pander to these people because that's where their moneymaker is. Unfortunately, what they have done is instead alienate the majority of Americans who aren't these rich white liberals. And because they have done so, they have lost the trust of the American people. So Vivek is handling this brilliantly because he is avoiding the basic trap where the reporter is trying to get him to say, I don't trust the media. That's not what you're supposed to say in this regard, particularly when you're running for office. What you're supposed to say is, I believe in the virtue of free speech. I believe that a free and fair media will self-police the problem. We just don't have a free and fair media. And Vivek can't say that last part. I can, because I'm fortunate enough. But Vivek is smart enough to avoid that pitfall, because the moment he does that, the reporters will go, oh, how terrible, you don't believe us. They'll clutch their pearls, they'll whine, they'll try to make sure that their audience understands that the reporters are the good guys here. All right, the mainstream media outlet that's giving you the continual slop, they're the good guys. And Vivek is trying to make them look bad. He avoids that pitfall and instead says what needs to be heard. That a free and fair media, under the First Amendment, having the constitutional right to free speech is the best way forward. Now, granted, the actual best way forward is for these reporters to have some virtue, for these reporters and their producers to allow the truth to be told. But the moment they do that, they are going to lose their gravy train. And this happens on both sides. But the moment that they try to frame the truth, that's when they cross the boundary from a free and fair media to a biased and controlled media. And Vivek is not playing those games. And that's why he's been such a firebrand and one of my favorite candidates from this last cycle. I can't wait to see what he does next. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. And until then, y'all have a good one.